Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in DevOps Practitioner series. This is episode 5, and we're going to talk about site reliability engineering. So, when I was trying to identify who would be the most appropriate person to give us practical insights, I was delighted to be introduced to Jon Chu, site reliability engineering manager at Google. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation. Thanks, John, for taking your time today and sharing your valuable insights on all about site reliability engineering. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me.
Excellent. So, for viewers, John, why don't you give a quick rundown of your journey, your experience, and the last few years, what you have been doing on site reliability engineering?
Sounds great. So my background is all over the map. I've spent some time on research systems, on autonomous systems, unmanned robotics, etc. And that eventually led its way to getting a position at Google. At Google, I'm a site reliability manager, as Suresh mentioned. And what I do is I manage a team that's responsible for keeping a set of services online, making sure that they behave and operate. And in my case, it's a bunch of cloud machine learning services. So some of the services that you may see Google offer with respect to machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Excellent. So let's kickstart. SRE has been a buzzword, though I know that it all came to the books of Google in 2003.
Yep.
It's been a big buzzword, and we are having a lot of conversation with clients. But what do you tell any organization that wants to start the journey towards SRE? You know, there's a lot of butterflies on the stomach. Should we do it? Is it on a hype curve? So, what do you think should an organization? What would you suggest an organization starting its journey towards SRE?
So yeah, thanks for asking that. I think really SRE is a set of philosophies and practices that an organization can apply, kind of get a handle on their reliability and resilience. You might see this in the book as well. But the thing about Google's SRE implementation is it's not going to work everywhere. Let's be clear about that and set the tone here. One should not necessarily directly lift Google's implementation or what's in the book as the only way to do this. Context is super important. Each organization kind of needs to figure out what's works best for them, and sometimes it's custom. Sometimes you can take it directly from Google's SRE, and maybe you have to do your own approach. There's no one size fits all for this. A thing to think about is that this is new for your organization, right? If you're going to look to adopt this, you're starting this journey. You're looking to create and foster a new culture, a new mindset, because it's ultimately about that. I said philosophies and practices. It's about your mindset. And SRE teams are ultimately about flexibility and diversity. You need to make sure you bring strong technical skills and creativity to solve these problems. We want to solve problems in novel ways. That's kind of how SRE was created. It's not about kind of taking your hammer and keep swinging at the same problems. You want to look at the whole life cycle of your systems. You look at how the big picture, how different systems interact. It's not about, well, I have an SRE team, they go do their thing over in a silo. It's very much along the lines with a lot of the other modern practices about integration and having them have cross-functional interaction. And that leads me to the last kind of thing is making sure that they're enabled to collaborate with their partners. SRE teams aren't on their own. They can work with developers, they can work with product, they can work with any team necessary to make sure that you can enact and achieve the vision that you're setting forth, because that's ultimately why you're considering this and standing up an SRE team. You want to make this change. So enable them and empower them to do so.
Excellent. Thanks. I think that's a very valuable insights about telling someone how do you do that. So what tangible steps can someone take in that particular journey? Because everybody wants to look at what does it look concrete. Step one, step two might be like a baby step that they want to step on to see whether they're going in the right direction, because that's a part of it. Because there are so many different aspects of SRE we talk about. We talk about toil, error budgets, SLOs, and stuff like that. But what tangible steps, looking at the current state that they operate, one should take to be moving in that direction?
Yeah, I'm going to list them. They're no particular order. You actually enumerated some of them that I'm going to talk about. An example is toil. This is low-hanging fruit for you, right? For your organization, more specifically. An organization that's looking to adopt SRE-like practices. I say SRE-like because, again, it's context dependent and all that. You can look at the behaviors that are and activities that your teams do and address the toily parts of them. And a reminder what toil is. It's something that's manual, something that you have to do by hand, something that's repetitive, something that's ultimately automatable, right? It's not worth your time trying to automate something that you can't really be automated. It's got to be tactical, something that's really short-lived, short duration. It doesn't have that enduring value, because if it's long value and all these, and it violates those kind of 3 or 4 things that I've mentioned, it's actually a big project. It's something there, and it may not be considered toil. There's value in this. The other thing that toil has is it actually scales roughly linearly with service growth. So as your organization scales, or as the service, and service can be technical service, it could be organizational service, but that you keep doing it, and you have to do more of it. That's toil. That's something that is worth a little bit of time, because as your organization grows, you're spending more percentage of your time doing it. You may need to staff up, and budgets and then the reality of today's world, you may not be able to do that. So spending a little bit of time to say, invest in that future so that you can automate away some of those tasks. That's super important. So what you don't ultimately want to do in this case is, we have a mantra about don't feed the machine human blood, right? You don't want to make the humans the machine for you. We have computers, we have systems that can automate that for us. So that's one tangible step. And that doesn't have to be big. It could be very small steps to automate some things. Maybe you do month-end reporting, that you could write a few scripts that would simplify it.
Right.
That's a start, right? Realize the benefits of that. So another point is establish SLOs. I think this is kind of a big point that we talk about a lot. And one of the things about SLOs is it's not just having the objective, you need to have consequences that go with the objective. You want to clearly think about the bar you want to operate. You want this to represent the needs of the user or the business, and no more. You got to be really critical about this and what's good enough. Excess SLO, basically more restrictive SLO, is expensive. It's a cost to velocity. It's a cost to the teams that are enforcing it or trying to enable it. It could be resource intensive in terms of compute. That it's hard, right? And so what you want it to be is just good enough to represent the needs of the users or needs of the business. And so this comes down to creating these objectives and creating a budget, right? That again, straight out of the book, kind of, well, what does it mean if you are meeting this objective, right? What does it mean if you're not meeting this objective? And that creates this budget. This is a common language for everyone involved, whether it's the users or the product folks representing the users, whether it's the engineers trying to implement the system. This language is about, okay, we are meeting our budget or our SLO, and we are X% into the budget. We're consuming it slowly. That's not a bad thing. You have velocity. Things are going well. When you're out of budget, well, it's hard to spend money that you don't have. It's hard to spend budget that you don't have. And so this allows everyone involved to be able to objectively talk about these reliability goals. And you have this built-in feedback mechanism. As you start consuming more of it, you can slow down. Oh, the end of the month is here. I'm not sure if I have the resources or the budget to spend. Let's slow down a little bit. Maybe we push that feature to next month because we don't want the system to break. Or, hey, we haven't had an incident or anything that's dipped our budget in weeks. Maybe we can ship that new feature early, a little bit earlier than we thought, because we can afford that risk. Yeah. And that might be really beneficial to the business to accelerate, right? There could be competitive forces at play. So the objectives and talking about how you can do reliability and balance that against your kind of velocity or what the customers wants is super great. Right. And along with that, SLOs is measurement. Like, we got to measure everything. Not everything. You got to measure. Correct. So you need to monitor. You cannot enforce or assess things you don't have eyes on. You got to kind of see what's going on. You got to be able to measure it and respond to it. And one thing I really want to impress upon is it's got to represent your users. Don't measure things that and act on things that you just because you can measure them. It's not necessarily useful to say, well, CPU load is over 50%. Well, why do I care? Right? That's not a good measurement. What you care about is, oh, the customer is getting an error message on their screen. That the customer cares about.
Right.
The CPU load spikes, and they still get served the page. It doesn't really matter. They don't see it. And so very much start with the customer side or the user and work your way back into what technically you can represent in that. And that's super useful. Okay? It's an objective so that you can assess customer satisfaction and happiness, because ultimately that's what the system's there for. It's to solve human and business problems, not to solve other computer problems.
Right. Well, I think that's great.
And lastly, I have one more thing, and this is a hot topic. It's retrospectives, right? You learn a lot from this. This is an investment. I'm going to paraphrase John Alspaugh from Adaptive Capacity Labs. Like, when you have an incident, you lost a whole bunch of money potentially, or opportunity cost of a lot of money. You might as well learn that much worth of knowledge. You want a return on that investment. So anytime something goes wrong, that's your opportunity to learn and improve. So it's got to be blameless. And you got to talk about it. And you want to invest and fix those systems and not the people. Even if there's a person involved in what went wrong, it's not their failure, it's the role that had an issue, right? They were unable to do this because of permissions, right? So let's fix the permissions as an example. So putting that all together, these are kind of things that you can look at that I think are low effort. They're low-hanging fruit, not low effort. Let me back up. It's low-hanging fruit. You can think about it critically, and you can gain a lot out of how you are going to reflect on your business and how these practices can influence and affect your business.
Thanks, John. That was really good to get a few tips that we can take away on the low-hanging fruits to apply on that. Now, there are organizations and clients that we work with. They say, you know what, we're not that big. We don't have scalability issues. So do you think that SRE would still work for us? Because they think that they have this notion site reliability engineering is all to do with scalability. And we are a small startup company that are having a X number of users. We have apps being deployed. Fairly everything is working well as part of doing it. Will SRE still need to be focused for us because we don't see a scalability at this moment?
Absolutely. I think that even if your organization is not that large, the principles and the practices can apply. We talked about toil a little bit earlier. One possible outcome of you're addressing toil is automation. And automation can help you change both the risk profile of your system and kind of the impact that your developers or your SREs or your DevOps folks or whatever you're calling them, have on your organization. So, for example, when you automate a system, you reduce the human errors, right? Granted, you might have an error in the code that you've written on the automation itself, but if you vet that, that's consistent for you. It's behaving in a consistent manner. Well, now you've taken human errors out of that. That's potential cost down the road. It enables scaling if you need it. I know we're talking about, well, we don't need it. Well, maybe in a month, a year, maybe you do. Well, now it's something that you don't have to invest in later. You've already paid that cost now, and you can scale up along with your service with little to no overhead. You reduce your critical points of failure. Well, is there that one dev or sysadmin or DevOps person that knows how to do a thing? Well, if it's automated, congratulations, it's baked into the code base. It's not in that one engineer. And so you actually improved your resilience of your organization that way. And then ultimately, back to what these small organizations, you hired these engineers, your employees, to do something great for you. Do you want them spending their time on things that have no enduring value? Back to one of the definitions of the toil. Now, if they can spend a little bit of time to automate, they can then stop doing that altogether, and future time is actually back to what you hired them for, to bring the value to the business and just not, again, feeding human blood to the machine, just cranking the machine. Oh, I got to generate this report, and then I got to go massage it, and then I got to do this. Well, if I can write a script, it's Thursday, it's the last Thursday of the month, I hit the button, and then I walk away. Or even better, it's a cron job. I don't even hit the button.
Right.
Now you're sitting there, and that's a very small version of that. If that's part of your culture, it's not about whether you're scaling or not. It's about, again, us allowing your engineers to spend times on problems that matter to your business and not to keeping the machine itself going.
Right. Absolutely. And for organizations, few of our clients and customers are particularly from banking and financial services, and they have this whole legacy baggage that they are looking at whether will this work, because one is it is a highly regulated environment. The second one is they have a large existing base that still resides on mainframes and legacy infrastructure. So with that kind of aspects, do you think that how will SRE help in those aspects? And what should be their thought process, considering it's a highly regulated industry and we try to have a lot of backlog, there's not a lot of cloud natives. How does that play a role?
So yeah, absolutely. This is a great question. This is a really challenging thing, but I really do believe that SRE principles can help. Again, it's built on principles, philosophy, and approach. This is about, when we talk about adopting SRE like principles, it's meeting your organization where it is, including its culture and its environment. These regulations are part of that in culture, part of that environment. And to merely or blindly lift Google's implementation is neglecting, and ignoring that culture and that environment. So that said, a highly regulated environment may not have as many opportunities to automate things. You might just have to have a human sign off on things. It happens, but it doesn't mean you can't automate or you can't address things where you can. Doesn't mean you can't establish error budgets. It doesn't mean you can't establish SLOs. These are things you can still look at, you can still attempt to achieve. Regulations and requirements just kind of create another dimension about what represents your users. It doesn't always constrain, it's not always about the implementation. It tells you what you need to achieve, but not how to do it many times. And so taking a step back and saying, how can I apply maybe a new thought process to this? Maybe I can still meet the spirit, I meet the letter of the law, but I don't need to do it in an exact way. An example I have in my past experiences, I worked on a bunch of systems governed by a NIST publication, 800-171. It's a 100-page cybersecurity document specifying how to protect sensitive information, right? Example requirement was, okay, update malicious code protection mechanisms when new releases are available. Okay, it didn't tell me how to do it. I just need to update when available. Well, I can create an SLO around this. It looks sort of like a latency metric. Maybe the 99th percentile of days between new release of protection and rollout to my system is less than 30 days. Maybe the 90th percentile is 14 days, or the 50th percentile is 7 days. Well, now I have a way to look at how I'm rolling out and meeting this particular metric over time, or requirement specifically over time. I can measure the latency on how long it took me from release to rollout. I can then, if I exceed my latency metric, it took me 60 days to roll out this release for whatever reason. Well, now I can do a retrospective and say, hey, why did that happen? Was it a human process that was broken? Was there another dependency system that prevented us from doing so? Now you can then create either a targeted effort project to improve that, so that you can maintain, again, this seemingly straightforward, update your malicious code protection thing in a SRE-like manner. You can then approach it in a very systematic way. And you can look at that and take that kind of view on roughly all of your requirements. Will you be able to get them wholesale? Hey, tomorrow we're going to get all, hundreds of requirements into this SRE-like view framework right away? Absolutely not. But you can work on one, and then the next, and the next. And as your team adopts that culture and that mindset, it becomes more straightforward and more, I'll say, easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very valid ones of looking at some of the controls and seeing how we can create an SLO for that. And in fact, we have had this experience where we are looking at even the batch jobs that is being done. For example, they want to have a batch job run at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So how are you kind of making it available, not just in 8 hours, 8 o'clock Eastern, probably 6 o'clock Eastern, so that you know that you have an opportunity, even if it spills over, you can actually do that. So there can be a lot of opportunities to even look at legacy batch jobs and systems
Yep.
to apply these principles. I totally agree that what you said across, and we can talk for these SRE for hours now, and
Yeah.
conscious of time. What I wanted to also check is that for people who have been viewers of this particular episode, what would you like the audience to take away from this interview? I mean, what would be something that they can go back on Monday morning and say, hey, you know what? We got these few nuggets of wisdom from Jon that we can go there and apply. Is that a kind of a secret sauce or a magic wand that they can go there and start applying?
So I gave you a whole bunch of things that you might want to look at and consider. And actually, I want to take a completely different spin. What I would love for your audience to take away is actually, this is a journey. We talked about it as a journey. I didn't say about adoption or conversion, or it's a journey. The journey to adopt these practices and principles will kind of mirror the development of your organization or your service. There will be hiccups. There will be issues. Things will happen that will set you back. That's okay. Recognize that that's part of it, and that the process itself accounts for that. Having retrospectives, what went well, the idea that this is not one way to do it, that you have to meet your organization where it is and interact, that's part of it. So when you say, hey, maybe I lifted Google's way of doing things, it didn't work super well, that's okay. Then you do your retrospective. Oh, this is what worked well within our organization. This is a lesson we learned, and this is what went poorly. How do we fix the poorly part? And so using the principles will actually help you get better at using the principles.
Right.
So measure your organization on how you're doing across these and do the impact. There will be incidents, there will be process failures, production will go down. It's going to happen. And go back to those fundamentals. Take time to introspect about them, talk to those involved, write a retrospective, learn from those mistakes, and then do what you can to actually automate them away. Because again, back to that investment, this is an investment. You have this opportunity that you would never pay for yourself, but it was thrust upon you. Maximize the return on that investment. So that's actually the ultimate takeaway, not go do toil first or SLOs, but recognize the process in and of itself reinforces itself, and that you can grow on this, and you can start actually very, very small and progressively build out from there.
I think that's a great insight, Jon. I think in the last 20 minutes or so, what we have done is bringing in kind of peeling all the onion and seeing how it is in the core. The core is basically, it's a journey, not a destination. And you have to do iterative learning, understand that failure is an essential part of it. And whenever we talk about failure, people say that there's a negative connotation to failure because they don't want to fail, but nothing worthwhile has been achieved if you don't undergo a failure. So it's essentially the spirit is more important, the intent is more important, and we need to trust people, your peers, and see how we can collaboratively start to make this work well. So thanks a lot again, Jon, for your time today in sharing your valuable insights on this practitioner episode on SRE. I hope we will have our viewers and other people who are listening to this episode to take some takeaways and get this one moving in their journey towards success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.